In this video we take a look at Omens of the Deep, a new expansion for Elder Sign by Fantasy Flight Games, and the title already links it to the previous expansion, Omens of Ice, and the two expansions are in fact rather similar. The theme is different and the setting is different, but mechanically the difference is not huge. The setting, well, we are not in the cold north like we were in Omens of Ice. Now we are exploring the sea, looking for clues to understand the mystery and the horror and the awe of the sunken city or Lie and Cthulhu slumbering in it. So yes, fun, an expansion inspired directly by the most popular and probably the most influential story by Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu. One that has been so incredibly important in the hobby, in the gaming hobby, especially board games and card games, much more than video games. I mean, there's just so many. It seems to me almost like there's been a synergy. Lovecraft has given very interesting themes for board games and card games, and in turn those have helped increase the popularity of Lovecraft among hobby gamers. So either way, finally, yes, we have an expansion for Elder Sign in which we can investigate a series of mysteries and try to overcome a series of challenges related to the Call of Cthulhu. There's also another element inspired, taken from Dagon, another story by Lovecraft that I like very much. So thematically, from the point of view of the sources, very, very promising expansion. Let's take a closer look and let's see what you find in the expansion and how you can use the new components.
What you see here is pretty much what you get in the box, with the exception of the rulebook and a couple of tokens, but these are the main components of this expansion. You have new Mythos cards divided in two types for the two phases of the game, with texts and, well, just bad stuff that happens to you, as it is in tradition, the tradition of this type of card. Here you see a reference to the Deep One Legion. This is a new type of enemy, and you have a lot of these Deep Ones, guys, as you can see. Well, if you know Lovecraft from that tradition, you know what the Deep Ones are. So these enemies will pop out everywhere. They're extremely annoying and also pretty tough to eliminate, because after you remove them, by completing the challenge that they present, usually by using dice, as usual, you also have a condition on the back that actually tells you something else that you need to do in order to really defeat them. So you defeat them and then you need to really defeat them. Otherwise, as you can see, after you defeat them, they appear on another adventure. They are just so sneaky. You throw them in the water in one place and they pop up from the water somewhere else. Very thematic and also an interesting challenge. Speaking of challenges, you also have missions. These work exactly like monsters, but they simply belong to a different category, which means they cannot be targeted by game effects that the target monsters. If you have an advantage against monsters, they don't work as monsters. It's pretty much just a way of locking and unlocking certain game effects due to the fact that they work like monsters, but they're not labeled as such. Then we have the cards. We have some special cards, which are the cards that sort of punctuate the story. This one is in play at the beginning of the game. Once you resolve it, then you're instructed to move from card to card. And pretty much they're the cards that create the narrative, that connect together the various experiences and turn them into a sort of like a story. They punctuate the story. So very important for the experience, but also to be able to win the game. The Ultima Thule, this nice ship that you use to travel in the ocean, collecting clues and trying to survive the attacks of the Deep Ones. The Ultima Thule is where you can go and regroup and exchange trophies for various types of advantages, but alas, these Deep Ones really like the Ultima Thule and they'll try to destroy it throughout the game. In fact, if there ever are 4 Deep Ones on adventure cards, you flip the Ultima Thule to the Wreckhead side, which makes it not nearly as effective and useful for you as it is when it's actually a ship and not a rust bucket floating in the ocean. Here we have an interesting card that allows us to regulate several game effects. There will be a token on this track here, and as you can see, when the token reaches the ship here, you may travel to stage 2, but when the token goes to this space, then a Deep 1 Legion monster appears. So, well, bad. And there are game effects, of course, that will move the thing from one way to the other. There's also on the other side an interesting thing, the broken amulet or lié, and I don't want to tell you what it is. It's pretty fun. I'll let you discover it if you decide to pick up this expansion. Here we have the villains of the story. First, I want to show you our Dark Lord Cthulhu, all hail Cthulhu, all the one to whom we owe it all. We owe this great family of games that we have about Lovecraftian lore. Definitely, it is Cthulhu that made the fortune of the Lovecraftian mythos. Dagon, I really like the story, the titular story, the Dagon story. That's one of the first stories in the myth. Some people don't consider it canonical. I don't know how that is even possible, but I really like the story, so always nice for me to have an opportunity to have Dagon as a character in a game. Hydra, not nearly as iconic and archetypical a character like the other two in the Lovecraftian lore mythos tales, but still, well, we have 3 enemies this way. Characters, investigators that you can play. Definitely you have a mix of characters with some interesting energies, some interesting abilities. Nothing particularly groundbreaking, just more options for you. And some very familiar characters from previous games, from Arkham Horror, for example. And as you can imagine, it's a good mix of characters with high sanity, low stamina, high stamina, low sanity, different abilities, different things that they do. This is a very interesting character. More options for you. And then, of course, we get to the heart of the game, which is formed by these 2 decks of adventure cards, the Stage 1 and Stage 2 cards. Oops, they are in separate decks. You shuffle them, and those are the ones that create all the problems, that present the challenges that you will try to solve using your dice. There is an icon here. The color indicates the difficulty of the challenge that you find on the other side. There may be midnight effects and they need to be resolved when the clock of the game goes to midnight. There are some midnight effects, terror effects that apply when you entry the card. I don't know, I'm a little torn because I want to give you a sense of what you find, but I don't want to give you too many spoilers. I don't know, maybe I'll just show you some of the illustrations so you see thematically what you find, but you do not have the challenges of the game spoiled for you. It is well, the sea stories of Lovecraft, with the deep ones, with Cthulhu. Well, not Innsmouth. That also has to do with deep ones and whatchamacallit, with deep ones and the sea and the tentacles. But oopsie. So, as usual, variety of challenges, variety of situations, but of course, ultimately, okay, I'll show you some challenges. Ultimately, well, you know the game, you know all their sign. You're still using the main mechanic of the game, matching icons on your dice with icons on the cards, etc., etc., etc. What really makes the game different is the theme. About time that we have a game in Elder Sign, which is specifically about Cthulhu and the Dark Waters, in which Lié is. So the theme really is the main thing, and then a couple of other mechanics like the mechanic here to advance to the next stage, the deep ones, and the Ultima Thule. Those are the elements that mechanically make this expansion different from other products in the Elder Sign line.
So I like it very much. I like this expansion very much. The only limitation may be that it is indeed very similar to the previous one. Somehow I like this one a little bit more, or even considerably more, but because of the theme. The theme is just immensely more interesting and fascinating to me than Ithaqua and the other entities that are up there in the cold plains of the north and the cold winds and all that. The depth of the ocean, which is an allegory for the inscrutable abyss of the human mind, at the bottom of which Cthulhu is waiting, that to me is much more powerful. That is, to me, is much more interesting. So I would say that the game seems to be mechanically very similar, and maybe a little bit better, just because the new cards, the traveling, the deep ones, that's a nice idea. It really creates a sense of like, I wouldn't say panic, but definitely an oppressive sense of this overwhelming wave and after wave of attacks from the deep ones. So mechanically I found it a little bit better, but thematically immensely better. So although they're very similar, I like this one better. And I think that that's probably gonna be the case for most players, simply because the source of this expansion is so much more fascinating, so much more popular. And maybe that's the reason why they published the two in the order that they did, because if they had the Cthulhu expansion, which is mechanically good, coming out first, and then have another one which is more or less as good mechanically but with a less interesting theme, maybe people wouldn't buy the other one. Here, what can I tell you? If you have the expansion, which is about the cold, the frozen north, and you liked it, then you know you're gonna like this expansion mechanically, and you're gonna be drawn by the theme, so most likely you will want it. If you like the game, if you like Lovecraft, even if you had the previous expansion, I think you're gonna have fun with this one. Again, if nothing else, because there is a system mechanically that you know, and that you know you liked, and now we have a theme and a setting which really is very immersive. To me, it's almost, I want to say, almost magical how the game really manages to create a sense of setting, a sense of theme, a sense of story from such a simple core of abstract mechanics. You're rolling dice, forming sets, and yet the art, and yet the effects, everything really goes well together everyone together and contributes to create really an experience that feels Lovecraftian in nature, that is full of flavor and atmosphere. And again, I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating. And this atmosphere is the one of the best things that Lovecraft ever wrote, one of the most fascinating stories of horror and sci-fi from the 20th century. So when you have a game that does manage to capture that atmosphere, it's good. It's really good. Again, if, however, you want a game that as a game plays radically differently from the previous expansion, and you do have that expansion, then maybe you can skip this expansion. But if you're okay with an expansion that is mechanically similar, but really has a nice atmosphere and flavor, then Omens of the Deep definitely is a good expansion to add to your collection of Elder Sign games and products and expansions. So it's good. It's a good expansion.